We need a more youthful direction. I had just set my coffee mug down on the polished mahogany table when those words fell like a hammer blow across the boardroom. 18 years, building something from nothing. And now, I was being replaced by a guy who once ran a TikTok channel for a perfume brand. But the story didn't end there. A phone call I received the next day would turn everything around, both for me and the company. My name is Gavin Mororo. Until yesterday, I was the Executive Vice President of Operations at Ferndale Logistics, one of the largest transportation companies in Charlotte, North Carolina. Today, I'm 55 years old, unemployed, and sitting in my home office, staring at a severance package that doesn't begin to compensate for nearly 2 decades of blood, sweat, and tears. The board meeting had started like any other Thursday morning session. I'd arrived early, as was my habit, to review the quarterly numbers before everyone else filed in. Our profits were up 12% year over year. Not record-breaking, but solid in an industry facing increased fuel costs and driver shortages. I'd implemented 3 major efficiency protocols in the past year alone that had saved the company millions. By any objective measure, I was doing my job exceptionally well. Then Richard Ferndale, our 72-year-old CEO and company founder, walked in, flanked by his daughter, Amber, and her husband, Ryder Beaumont. I should have recognized the warning signs right there. Amber rarely attended board meetings, and Ryder, well, he had no business being there at all. "Morning, Gavin." Richard nodded perfunctorily, avoiding my eyes as he took his seat at the head of the table. He'd been doing that a lot lately, avoiding direct contact with me. The other board members filtered in. An assortment of investors and executives who had been with the company for varying lengths of time, though none as long as me. I was the second employee Richard had ever hired back when Ferndale Logistics was just 3 trucks and a dream. I'd been there through every storm and celebration. After the standard review of the quarterly numbers, which should have been cause for modest celebration. Richard cleared his throat and glanced around the room, still avoiding my gaze, as you all know, the transportation industry is evolving rapidly. Digital transformation, sustainability initiatives, and changing consumer behaviors are reshaping our landscape. He sounded like he was reading from a script. To stay competitive, we need to evolve as well. That's when he said it. We need a more youthful direction. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. I felt a cold sensation spreading through my chest as Richard finally looked at me. "Gavin, you've been instrumental in building Ferndale Logistics. Your contributions over the past 18 years have been significant. But the board and I feel it's time for fresh leadership in operations." Sat perfectly still, my face a carefully composed mask, even as my mind raced through the implications. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything I'd sacrificed for this company. I'd like to introduce the board to our new Executive Vice President of Operations, Ryder Beaumont. Ryder, a man whose resume consisted primarily of lifestyle marketing for luxury brands, stood up with a practiced smile. At 32, he was slim and fashionably dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than what most of our truck drivers made in a month. His only qualification for this job was that he had married the boss's daughter 3 years ago. I'm excited to bring my experience in digital engagement and brand evolution to Ferndale Logistics, Ryder announced with the rehearsed confidence of someone who had never actually faced a real business crisis. I see tremendous opportunities to reposition our service offerings and leverage emerging technologies to capture next-generation market share. It was corporate buzzword bingo. Empty phrases strung together without any understanding of the operational complexities of a logistics company. The man had never scheduled a freight delivery, negotiated with Teamsters, or handled a supply chain disruption. He'd never stayed up all night during a blizzard, rerouting trucks to ensure time-sensitive medical supplies reached hospitals. He'd never done any of the 1,000 things that had constituted my daily life for nearly 2 decades. I thought about 2009, when the recession had nearly destroyed us. I'd remortgaged my house to help with cash flow when banks wouldn't lend to us. I'd worked 7 days a week for months, sleeping on a cot in my office, more often than in my own bed. I'd missed my daughter Ellie's high school graduation because I was personally driving a truck to deliver on a contract when half our drivers were out with the flu. And this was my reward. Being unceremoniously pushed aside for the CEO's son-in-law, the rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Richard outlined a transition period of 2 weeks, during which I would hand over my responsibilities to Ryder. My severance package included 6-month salary and health benefits, along with accelerated vesting of some stock options, generous by industry standards perhaps, but a pittance compared to what I had given this company. When the meeting concluded, several board members approached me with awkward condolences, murmuring platitudes about exciting new chapters and well-deserved rest. Only Margaret Chen, our CFO, and one of the few allies I had in senior leadership, seemed genuinely distressed. "This is wrong, Gavin," she whispered as she embraced me. "You built this division from the ground up. Apparently, that's the problem," I replied, struggling to keep bitterness from seeping into my voice. "I'm too associated with the old ways. This has nothing to do with your performance and everything to do with nepotism," Margaret said bluntly. "Everyone knows it." I appreciated her honesty, but it didn't change my situation. As the boardroom emptied, I remained seated, staring at the leather portfolio containing my severance agreement. Richard lingered by the door, clearly uncomfortable. "Gavin," he began, his voice carrying a hint of what might have been regret. "I want you to know this wasn't an easy decision." I looked up at him. This man I had respected for so many years, this man whose company I had helped build, whose dream I had made my own. Was it a decision at all, Richard? Or just a formality after you'd already promised my position to your son? He flinched slightly. "The board voted unanimously." "A board you control through majority ownership," I pointed out. "Let's not pretend this was democratic." Richard straightened, his momentary discomfort replaced by the authoritative bearing of a CEO. "Business evolves, Gavin, so must leadership." "And what exactly does your son-in-law know about logistics operations?" I asked quietly. "Ryder brings a fresh perspective. He understands digital marketing, social media, engagement. We move freight, Richard. We don't sell perfume or lifestyle branding. We coordinate thousands of shipments across complex supply chains with razor-thin margins for error." Richard's expression hardened. "Your attitude proves my point. You're resistant to change, stuck in outdated thinking. Ryder sees opportunities you don't," I could have argued further. *Ald have pointed out that I had consistently championed innovation throughout my tenure. That under my leadership, we had been early adopters of route optimization software, predictive maintenance systems, and driver safety technologies. I could have reminded him that I had built our digital tracking platform from scratch when competitors were still using paper logs. But what would be the point? His mind was made up. The real reason for my dismissal had nothing to do with my performance or vision for the company. It was simply that his daughter wanted her husband in a prestigious executive position, and Richard Ferndale had never been able to say no to Amber. "I'll clear out my office by the end of the day," I said, standing up and gathering my materials. "There's no rush, Gavin, take the weekend." Such generosity. 18 years and I got the weekend to pack up my life's work. I nodded curtly and left the boardroom, walking through the executive floor where whispers and averted gazes told me the news had already spread. My assistant Denise, who had been with me for 12 years, was teary-eyed when I reached my office. "Is it true?" she asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. "I'm afraid so. Ryder Beaumont is the new EVP of operations." Denise made a sound of disgust. That man couldn't operate a coffee machine without an instruction manual. Last month, he asked me what LTL freight meant. Less than truckload was one of the most basic terms in our industry. I smiled despite myself. "Well, he'll be your boss now. So, you might want to keep observations like that to yourself." "I won't be here," Denise said firmly. "I've already updated my resume. I'm not working for that entitled brat." Her loyalty touched me, but I couldn't let her jeopardize her career. Don't be hasty. You've got a mortgage and your son's college tuition to think about. I'll find something else, she insisted. This place won't be the same without you. As I began sorting through my personal belongings, deciding what to take home and what to leave behind, I reflected on the warning signs I should have heeded. The past few months had been filled with them, little indications that I was being systematically edged out. It had started with being excluded from strategic planning meetings I would normally have attended. Then came the gradual reduction in my approval authority for operational budgets. Projects I had initiated were mysteriously put on hold, and decisions I had previously made unilaterally were suddenly subject to executive committee review. Most telling of all had been Ryder's increasing presence at client meetings, where he had no logical role. He would sit silently, observing, occasionally asking questions that revealed his fundamental lack of understanding about our business. I had assumed Richard was giving him an education in the industry, perhaps grooming him for some other position. It never occurred to me that he was being prepared to take my job. 3 months ago, one of our most important clients, Linda Monroe, from Cascade Chemical, had called me directly after a meeting where both Ryder and I had been present. "What's going on over there, Gavin?" she had asked, her tone concerned. "I'm hearing rumors about leadership changes at Ferndale." "Nothing I'm aware of," I had replied, though even then, I'd felt a prickle of unease. "Well, I hope not. Your team's expertise is why we renewed our contract last year. That Beaumont fellow, I wasn't impressed. Couldn't answer basic questions about our hazmat transportation protocols." Before ending the call, Linda had said something that would prove to be crucially important. "If anything changes, call me." She had discreetly handed me her personal business card at our next in-person meeting, something she had never done before. At the time, I had filed the interaction away as curious, but not alarming now, as I packed the framed photos of my daughter and my late wife, Catherine, from my desk. I remembered Linda's card tucked away in my wallet. It suddenly seemed like a lifeline. By late afternoon, my office was nearly cleared out. The walls, once covered with awards, certifications, and photos documenting Ferndale's growth, were now bare. 18 years of my life, packed into 3 cardboard boxes. Denise appeared at my door. "They're gathering in the conference room. Apparently, Richard wants to give you a proper sense of..." I almost laughed at the absurdity. A farewell party for someone who had been unceremoniously fired that morning. "How thoughtful," I said dryly. "You don't have to go," Denise offered. But I did. Not for Richard or the board, but for the people I had worked with for so many years, the dispatchers, account managers, safety coordinators, and fleet supervisors who had been my true colleagues. I owed them a goodbye. The conference room was crowded when I arrived. Nearly everyone from headquarters had gathered, along with some drivers who happened to be in the terminal that day. There was cake, punch, and a large card signed by staff members. The atmosphere was somber rather than celebratory. Richard made a brief speech highlighting some of my contributions to Ferndale Logistics. Though his praise felt hollow after the morning's events, he presented me with a plaque commemorating my years of service, a generic award that looked like it had been ordered in haste from the local trophy shop. Then Ryder stepped forward, glass of punch in hand, to offer his own remarks. "I want to thank Gavin for his years of dedication to Ferndale Logistics," he began, his tone suggesting he was bestowing a great honor upon me with his acknowledgement. "The transportation industry is entering a new era, and while Gavin has admirably stewarded operations through the traditional phase of our business, the future demands new approaches, digital integration, and millennial-focused strategies." He raised his glass in my direction. "You've done your part, Gavin. Now it's time to let the next generation take the wheel and drive Ferndale into the future." The room was silent. I could feel the collective discomfort and indignation on my behalf. Several of my team members looked outright angry at Ryder's condescending tone. I could have responded in kind, could have pointed out that millennial-focused strategies meant nothing in an industry where reliability and operational excellence were the only metrics that mattered. Could have reminded everyone present of Ryder's complete lack of relevant experience. Could have wished him luck dealing with the first major crisis when he had no idea how to handle it. Instead, I simply nodded, set down my untouched punch, and began making my rounds through the room, shaking hands and exchanging quiet goodbyes with the people who had been my professional family for so long. Fleet manager Tony Ramirez, who had started as a driver 15 years ago, gripped my hand firmly. "This is Gavin. Pure, it's business," I replied, though I didn't believe it myself. "It's nepotism, and it's going to hurt this company," Tony insisted. "That pretty boy doesn't know the first thing about what we do." I appreciated Tony's loyalty, but urged restraint. "Don't do anything rash. You've got a good position here." "For now," Tony muttered, "until Golden Boy decides to bring in his own people." As I continued through the room, similar sentiments were expressed quietly by others. Margaret Chen hugged me again and slipped me her personal contact information. "Keep in touch, Gavin. This industry is smaller than people think." It took nearly an hour to say all my goodbyes. By the time I left the conference room, Richard and Ryder had already departed, apparently having more important matters to attend to than seeing off a long-time executive. I collected my boxes from my office and took one last look around the space where I had spent so much of my adult life. Then I walked out of Ferndale Logistics headquarters for what I thought would be the last time. The drive home to my house in the Myers Park neighborhood was a blur. I had purchased the Tudor-style home 15 years ago, after Catherine and I had decided we wanted more space for our growing daughter. Catherine had loved the garden, spending countless hours nurturing roses and hydrangeas. After her death from breast cancer 7 years ago, I had maintained the garden as best I could, though it never quite achieved the vibrant beauty it had under her care. Ellie, now 25 and working as a software engineer in Austin, had been my rock. During that terrible time, now, I dreaded telling her about losing my job, not because she would judge me. Ellie was unfailingly supportive, but because I hated adding any worry to her life. I carried my boxes into the house and set them down in the foyer, then went straight to the kitchen and poured myself a generous measure of bourbon. Settling into my favorite chair on the back porch, overlooking Catherine's garden, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the day's events. Anger came first. A burning indignation at the injustice of being discarded after so many years of loyal service. Then humiliation, as I imagined colleagues and industry peers learning of my dismissal. Finally, a creeping fear about what would come next. At 55, I wasn't exactly a hot commodity in the job market, despite my experience. Age discrimination was real, if rarely acknowledged openly. My phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. "How did the quarterly board meeting go?" "Good numbers this time, right?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. I didn't want to tell her over text, but I couldn't bring myself to call her yet either. I needed time to process, to figure out how to frame this setback in a way that wouldn't worry her. "Meeting went fine," I typed back. "Numbers solid. I'll call you this weekend with an update." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. I would tell her everything, just not tonight. As darkness fell, I remained on the porch, nursing my bourbon and contemplating my options. My severance would cover expenses for a while, and I had savings and investments. Financially, I wasn't in immediate trouble. But what about after that? Should I look for another corporate position? Consider consulting? Early retirement wasn't financially viable yet. Not with at least a decade before I could access retirement funds without penalties. And beyond the practical considerations, there was the question of purpose. For 18 years, Ferndale Logistics had been the center of my professional identity. Without it, who was I? I was still wrestling with these questions when I went to bed that night, and they followed me into a restless sleep filled with fragmented dreams of empty offices and packed boxes. Morning brought no clarity, but it did bring a sense of resolve. I had been knocked down, but I wasn't out. The first step was to take stock of my situation, objectively. After coffee, I sat at my home office desk and created a detailed spreadsheet of my financial position. As I suspected, I could maintain my current lifestyle for at least a year without income, longer if I was careful with expenses. That gave me breathing room to make thoughtful decisions rather than jumping at the first opportunity out of desperation. Next, I updated my LinkedIn profile and reached out to a few industry contacts, not actively job hunting yet, just re-establishing connections. I was careful to be vague about my departure from Ferndale, simply mentioning that I was exploring new opportunities after 18 rewarding years. By noon, I had sketched out a rough plan for the coming weeks: networking meetings, industry conferences I could attend, potential companies to target. I would approach this methodically, as I approached every challenge. As I reviewed my contact list, Linda Munro's card caught my eye again. Cascade Chemical was Ferndale's largest client, representing nearly $100 million in annual revenue. Linda had been their director of supply chain for over a decade, and we had developed a strong professional relationship built on mutual respect. If anyone would give me honest feedback about my prospects in the industry, it would be Linda, and her comment about calling if anything changed now seemed prescient. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed her number. "Linda Munro," she answered crisply on the second ring. "Linda, it's Gavin Mororo." There was a brief pause. "Gavin, I was hoping you'd call. I heard the news." News traveled fast in our industry. Word gets around quickly. "It's a small world," Linda agreed. "I have to say, I'm shocked, and not in a good way. That makes two of us." "Listen," Linda said, her voice dropping slightly as if she was ensuring privacy. "Are you free for dinner tonight? There's something I'd like to discuss with you, and I'd prefer to do it in person." The invitation surprised me. Linda and I had occasionally shared meals at industry events or during contract negotiations, but this felt different. "I'm completely free," I replied. "Name the time and place." "Bentley's Steakhouse. * 7 o'clock. I'll reserve a private table." Bentley's was one of Charlotte's most exclusive restaurants, known for its discretion and private dining areas where business could be conducted without fear of eavesdropping. "I'll be there," I confirmed. Curiosity piqued. After ending the call, I pondered what Linda might want to discuss. Perhaps she had industry information that could help my job search or connections she was willing to share. Whatever it was, it seemed significant enough to warrant an in-person conversation at a private venue at precisely 7:40 p.m. I arrived at Bentley Steakhouse, dressed in one of my better suits. Despite my uncertain employment status, appearances mattered in business, and I wasn't about to show up looking defeated. The maître escorted me to a secluded booth in the back of the restaurant, where Linda was already waiting. At 50, Linda Munro was an imposing figure in the chemical manufacturing industry. Sharp, no-nonsense, and widely respected for her strategic acumen. She rose to greet me with a firm handshake. "Gavin, thank you for coming on such short notice." "Thank you for the invitation," I replied as we both sat down. "I admit I'm curious about what warranted an emergency steak dinner." Linda smiled briefly, before her expression turned serious. "First, let me say how appalled I am at how Ferndale treated you. Replacing you with Richard's son-in-law is not just personally insulting to you. It's terrible business." I appreciated her directness. "Thank you though. I'm trying to take the high road and call it a strategic realignment." Linda snorted. "Call it what it is. Nepotism in its purest form, and it's going to cost them dearly." Something in her tone caught my attention. "What do you mean?" The waiter approached to take our drink orders. Linda requested a Manhattan, and I opted for a neat Scotch. Once he had departed, Linda leaned forward slightly. "Our contract with Ferndale is up for renewal in 2 months, she said. "We've been with them for 12 years, largely because of the operational excellence your team consistently delivered." I nodded, familiar with the long-standing relationship between our companies. Cascade Chemical manufactured industrial chemicals that required specialized handling and transportation protocols, Their business was lucrative but demanding, with strict safety and compliance requirements that many logistics providers struggled to meet. Over the past year, we've been approached repeatedly by Riverton Transport, Linda continued. The name was familiar, a mid-sized transportation company that had been growing aggressively in the southeast region. They had a solid reputation, but hadn't previously competed in the specialized chemical transportation segment where Ferndale dominated. Riverton is expanding their hazmat capabilities and making a serious play for our business, Linda explained. They've invested in new equipment, safety protocols, and compliance systems. They're offering competitive rates, state-of-the-art tracking, and dedicated customer service teams. I processed this information immediately, understanding the threat to Ferndale. Losing Cascade Chemical would be a devastating blow. Until yesterday, we weren't seriously considering switching providers, Linda said. The transition costs would be substantial, and we valued our relationship with you personally. But now, she'll let the implication hang in the air. Now, you're reconsidering. Because I'm gone, I completed her thought. Partly, Linda acknowledged, but there's more to it than that. She paused as the waiter returned with our drinks and took our dinner orders. Once we were alone again, Linda continued, her voice lowered. Riverton's CEO, James Wilson, reached out to me directly this morning. Somehow, he already knew about your departure from Ferndale. That wasn't surprising. Industry gossip traveled at the speed of light. He asked a very interesting question, Linda said, watching me carefully. He wanted to know if Cascade would consider moving our business to Riverton if you were part of their leadership team. I nearly choked on my scotch. Excuse me, Linda smiled at my reaction. Riverton wants to hire you. Gavin, they're looking to establish a dedicated chemical logistics division, and they want you to build and lead it. I set my glass down carefully, mind racing. Why would they want me? I just got fired. You didn't get fired for performance reasons, and everyone in the industry knows it, Linda said flatly. Your operational expertise is legendary. You've built the most efficient hazmat transportation system in the Southeast, possibly in the entire country. Riverton would be idiots not to want you. And they tied this offer to Cascade's business? I asked. Both flattered and slightly uncomfortable with the ethical implications. Linda's expression turned shrewd. Let me be very clear. Cascade makes decisions based on what's best for our business. We need a logistics partner with proven expertise in handling our products safely and efficiently. That expertise just happens to reside in you, not in a company. She took a sip of her Manhattan. I told James that if you were leading their chemical logistics division, we would seriously consider moving our business to Riverton. That's not a bribe or a quid pro quo. It's simply acknowledging that you are the value proposition we care about, not the Ferndale logo on the trucks. My mind was spinning with possibilities. What exactly is Riverton offering? James would like to meet with you directly to discuss details, but he authorized me to share the broad strokes, Linda said. They're offering a senior vice president position with full autonomy to build the chemical logistics division from the ground up. Competitive salary, performance bonuses, and this is the key part, equity in the new division. Equity, ownership, a stake in something I would build myself without a capricious board or nepotistic CEO to undermine me. They're moving quickly on this, Linda continued. They've already secured funding for the expansion, purchased a fleet of chemical-certified tankers, and begun renovations on a terminal facility specifically designed for hazmat operations. They've been planning this move for some time, I observed. Linda nodded. For at least a year, but your sudden availability accelerated their timeline. And if I accept, Cascade would move its business to Riverton. I can't make absolute promises. Without board approval, Linda said carefully. But I can tell you that I would personally advocate strongly for the switch, and my recommendation carries significant weight. The waiter returned with our steaks, providing a momentary pause in the conversation. As we began eating, I considered what Linda had shared. The opportunity was tantalizing, a chance not just to continue my career, but to build something new on my own terms. You mentioned other companies Riverton is targeting, I said after a few bites. Anyone I know? Linda's smile was knowing. Global, Pharma and Northeastern Chemicals have both expressed interest in following our lead. Together with Cascade, that would represent about 60% of Ferndale's current chemical transportation revenue. The implications were staggering. If all three companies moved their business to Riverton, Ferndale would be crippled. Richard and his precious son-in-law would be left scrambling to explain the catastrophic loss to their shareholders. Part of me, the part still raw from betrayal, found satisfaction in the scenario. But I wasn't interested in revenge for its own sake. I was interested in building something valuable. I'll meet with James, I decided. But I need to do my due diligence on Riverton first. I want to understand their financial position, corporate culture, and strategic vision before committing to anything. Of course, Linda agreed. That's why I admire you, Gavin, always thorough. When can James meet? He's in Charlotte tomorrow. I took the liberty of tentatively scheduling breakfast at the Peninsula Club at 8 Narrow, if that works for you. The Peninsula Club was an exclusive country club on Lake Norman, north of Charlotte, another discreet location for sensitive business discussions. I'll be there, I confirmed. As dinner continued, we shifted to lighter topics, but my mind was already racing ahead, analyzing the opportunity from every angle. By the time we parted ways outside the restaurant, I had a mental list of questions for James Wilson and research I needed to conduct before our meeting. Back home, I spent several hours at my computer reviewing everything I could find about Riverton Transport, their financial statements. They were privately held, but some information was publicly available. Press releases, industry analyses, and social media presence. I reached out to a few trusted contacts who had worked with or for Riverton, asking discreet questions about their operations and culture. The picture that emerged was promising. Riverton had been founded 12 years ago by James Wilson, a former logistics executive who had grown frustrated with the bureaucracy and inertia at larger companies. He had built Riverton around principles of operational excellence, employee empowerment, and technological innovation values that aligned with my own approach to business. Financially, they appeared solid with steady growth, manageable debt, and significant recent capital investment. Their corporate culture emphasized both performance and work-life balance with impressively low turnover rates compared to industry averages. Most importantly, their strategic vision included expansion into specialized transportation segments with chemical logistics as a priority growth area. They had the infrastructure and financial backing to make a serious play in this space, but lacked the specialized expertise and client relationships gaps I could potentially fill. By the time I went to bed, I was cautiously optimistic about the possibility, if the offer was as described and my due diligence continued to yield positive results, this could be more than just a soft landing. After Ferndale, it could be a genuine opportunity to build something significant. I arrived at the Peninsula Club 15 minutes early the next morning, dressed in my best suit and armed with a portfolio of questions and notes. The club's restaurant offered panoramic views of Lake Norman, its waters glittering in the morning sunlight. James Wilson was already there, seated at a corner table overlooking the lake. I recognized him from industry events, though we had never formally met. In his mid-40s, Wilson had the trim build of a regular runner and a reputation as a straight shooter in an industry not always known for transparency. He stood as I approached, extending his hand. Gavin Mororo, it's a pleasure to finally meet you properly. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. Asterisk likewise. James, thank you for making time on such short notice. When opportunities like this arise, hesitation is costly, he replied, as we both took our seats. I've admired your work at Ferndale for years. What Richard did was unconscionable and fortunate for me. A server appeared to take our coffee orders, giving me a moment to assess Wilson more carefully. His manner was confident but not arrogant, and he had the focused attention of someone genuinely engaged in the conversation. Linda mentioned, "You have a proposition for me," I said once we were alone again. Direct and to the point. I appreciate that. Wilson nodded. Yes, I do. As you may know, Riverton has been expanding steadily across the Southeast. We've built strong positions in general freight, refrigerated transport, and automotive logistics. The next logical step for us is specialized chemical transportation. A challenging segment to enter. I observed high regulatory barriers, specialized equipment requirements, significant liability concerns. Precisely why we need someone with your expertise, Wilson agreed. We've made the necessary capital, investments, equipment, facilities, compliance, systems. What we lack is the operational leadership and client relationships to make it successful quickly. And you think I can provide both? Wilson leaned forward slightly. I know you can. Your reputation in this industry is impeccable. You built Ferndale's chemical division from scratch into the market leader. The safety record, on-time performance, and client retention under your leadership speak for themselves. Our coffee arrived. Along with the breakfast menus, after ordering, Wilson continued. Here's what I'm proposing. Senior Vice President of Chemical Logistics, reporting directly to me. Full autonomy to build your team and design operational protocols. Competitive. Salary. I'm thinking 20% above your Ferndale compensation. That was generous. But the next part was even more intriguing. Additionally, we're offering a 15% equity stake in the chemical logistics division, with performance-based options for an additional 5%. When we spin the division off as a separate business unit in 3 to 5 years, that equity could be quite valuable. It was a compelling offer, far better than I had anticipated. The equity component particularly interested me. I would have a significant ownership stake in what I built. What's your timeline for launching the division? I asked. We've already secured the necessary permits and equipment. Terminal renovations will be completed within 60 days. Ideally, we'd be operational within 90 days, which coincides conveniently with the end of Cascade Chemicals' contract with Ferndale. The timing wasn't accidental, of course. Wilson was positioning Riverton to capture Cascade's business the moment their Ferndale contract expired, and Linda has indicated Cascade would consider moving their business if I'm involved. I confirmed. Wilson smiled. Linda has been quite clear that Cascade values your operational expertise. She's made no firm commitments, but has expressed strong interest contingent on your participation. I sipped my coffee considering. What about Global Pharma and Northeastern Chemicals? I understand they've also been approached. Wilson didn't seem surprised that I knew this information. Both have indicated willingness to consider Riverton if we can demonstrate the same level of specialized expertise they've received from Ferndale. Your presence would provide that assurance. Our breakfast arrived, providing a natural pause in the conversation. As we ate, I asked several more detailed questions about Riverton's financial structure, growth strategy, and corporate culture. Wilson answered each thoroughly and transparently, occasionally pulling out his tablet to share specific data or documentation. By the time we finished eating, I had a comprehensive understanding of the opportunity and was increasingly interested. There was just one more important topic to address. I'd like to bring some key personnel with me, I said. People I trust who have specialized knowledge critical to this operation. Wilson nodded without hesitation. I assumed as much. We've budgeted for a core team of experts you'd select personally. I trust your judgment on who's essential. Some would be coming directly from Ferndale. I pointed out there could be legal complications regarding non-compete agreements. Our attorneys have reviewed Ferndale's standard employment contracts, Wilson replied. Their non-compete clauses are overly broad and likely unenforceable in North Carolina. But regardless, we're prepared to cover any legal expenses that might arise from transition issues. He had clearly done his homework and anticipated potential obstacles. I was impressed with his thoroughness. I need to think about this, I said. Finally, it's an excellent offer, but it's also a significant commitment. Of course, Wilson agreed readily. This isn't a decision to be made impulsively. Take the weekend to consider it. I'll have our attorneys draft a formal offer letter. With all the details we've discussed, you can review it with your own legal counsel. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, writing a number on the back before handing it to me. My personal cell. Call me any time if you have questions or want to discuss any aspect of the proposal further. As we walked out of the club together, Wilson added one final thought. Gavin, I want you to know that this isn't just about opportunistically grabbing Ferndale's clients. I've been planning this division for over a year and have been quietly hoping to recruit you for almost as long. Richard's short-sightedness just accelerated my timeline. We shook hands in the parking lot, and I drove home with my mind racing. The offer was everything I could have hoped for: financial security, professional autonomy, equity ownership, and the chance to build something meaningful on my own terms. But it wasn't just the professional opportunity that appealed to me. There was, I had to admit, a certain satisfaction in the knowledge that accepting Wilson's offer would likely inflict significant damage on Ferndale, and by extension on Richard and Ryder. Was that petty? Perhaps, but after 18 years of loyalty rewarded with dismissal, I felt entitled to a measure of vindication. Throughout the weekend, I conducted more research on Riverton, spoke with industry contacts, and carefully considered the implications of Wilson's offer. I also reviewed my non-compete agreement with Ferndale, which, as Wilson had suggested, contained language that legal experts generally considered overbroad and difficult to enforce. By Sunday evening, my decision was made. I called Wilson and accepted his offer, contingent on final review of the formal terms. Excellent news, Wilson responded, genuine enthusiasm in his voice. I'll have the paperwork to you tomorrow morning. Once that's finalized, we can begin strategic planning immediately, even before your official start date. I have some ideas already, I told him, and a short list of key personnel we should approach. I look forward to hearing both. Wilson said. This is the beginning of something significant, Gavin, for both of us. After ending the call, I felt a surge of energy and purpose I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just a new job. It was a new chapter, a chance to build something that truly reflected my vision and values. The following day, Wilson's offer letter arrived by courier. The terms were exactly as discussed, with comprehensive details on compensation, equity structure, and operational authority. After having my attorney review it, I signed the agreement and returned it to Riverton's headquarters. It was official. I was now Senior Vice President of Chemical Logistics at Riverton Transport, with a start date set for the following Monday. My first priority was securing key personnel. I reached out to 5 essential team members from Ferndale: Tony Ramirez, my fleet manager; Denise Williams, my executive assistant; Sarah Chen, our compliance director; Marcus Johnson, head of safety protocols; and Eduardo Vasquez, our lead dispatch supervisor. Each was carefully selected for their specialized expertise and proven loyalty. All 5 expressed immediate interest in joining me at Riverton. Despite the potential complications with Ferndale, simultaneously, Linda Munro formally notified Ferndale Logistics that Cascade Chemical would not be renewing their contract when it expired in 60 days. Her letter cited strategic realignment of transportation partnerships as the reason, with no mention of Riverton or me. I imagined the panic that must have ensued at Ferndale headquarters when that notification arrived. Cascade was their largest client, representing nearly a quarter of their total revenue and an even larger percentage of their profits due to the premium rates. Chemical Transportation commanded. Within 48 hours, similar notifications arrived from Global Pharma and Northeastern Chemicals. The dominoes were falling exactly as anticipated. Richard Ferndale called me that Friday, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. What the hell are you doing, Gavin? I'm not sure what you mean, Richard, I replied calmly. Don't play dumb. Cascade Global Northeastern, all cancelling within the same week. This has your fingerprints all over it. I'm not employed by Ferndale anymore. Richard, you made that decision quite clear. What your clients do is no longer my concern. Where are they going? He demanded. Tell me that at least. I suggest you ask them directly, I said, though I imagine they've already explained their reasons. This is about revenge, isn't it?" Richard's voice had taken on a desperate edge. "You're trying to punish me for replacing you." "No, Richard. This is about business. Companies make strategic decisions based on what's best for their bottom line. Isn't that what you told me? Business evolves, so must leadership." There was a long silence before Richard spoke again, his tone now conciliatory. "Look, Gavin, perhaps we can discuss your returning to Ferndale. The board has reconsidered its position." I almost laughed at the transparent attempt. "I appreciate the offer, Richard, but I already accepted a position elsewhere," where he asked sharply. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that information at this time," I replied, though I knew he would discover it soon enough. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have preparations to make for my new role." I ended the call before he could respond further. It wasn't a particularly mature moment cutting him off like that, but it was satisfying nonetheless. That weekend, I received calls from several other Ferndale executives, including Margaret Chen, all seeking information about the client departures and my new position. I remained politely vague, though I did hint to Margaret that she might want to update her resume. Ferndale was heading for turbulent times. Monday morning marked my first official day at Riverton Transport. I arrived at their headquarters at the modern glass and steel building on the outskirts of Charlotte. At 7:30 a.m., James Wilson met me in the lobby, greeting me warmly before giving me a tour of the facility. The contrast with Ferndale was striking. Where Ferndale's offices had been traditional and somewhat dated, Riverton spaces were contemporary, open, and filled with natural light. The technology was cutting edge with digital displays tracking shipments in real time and interactive planning stations for route optimization. "We've prepared temporary offices for your team here," Wilson explained as we entered a newly renovated wing. "But the permanent chemical logistics facility will be ready in about 6 weeks. My office was spacious and well appointed with views of the trucking terminal and beyond it, the rolling hills of the Carolina Piedmont. On my desk was a welcome package containing company information, security credentials, and a personalized note from Wilson expressing his excitement about our partnership. By 9 o'clock, the first of my team had arrived. Denise, ever efficient, had already submitted her resignation to Ferndale the previous Friday and was ready to begin organizing our new operation immediately. "This is quite a step up," she observed, looking around approvingly. "No more leaky ceiling tiles or temperamental heating system. No more Ryder Beaumont either," I pointed out. Denise grinned. "Worth the move just for that." Throughout the day, the rest of my core team arrived, each bringing valuable institutional knowledge and specialized skills from Ferndale. By late afternoon, we had established our initial organizational structure and begun developing implementation plans for the Chemical Logistics Division. Wilson joined us for a brief strategy session at 4 p.m., listening attentively to our preliminary ideas and offering thoughtful insights without micromanaging. "I'm impressed with what you've accomplished already," he said as the meeting concluded. "This confirms everything I believed about bringing you and your team on board." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. We designed operational protocols, established compliance procedures, developed client onboarding processes, and created driver training programs specifically for chemical transportation. The renovated terminal facility progressed rapidly with specialized loading docks, safety systems, and secure storage areas taking shape exactly as I had specified. Throughout this period, I maintained regular contact with Linda Monroe and representatives from Global Pharma and Northeastern Chemicals, ensuring they were comfortable with our progress and prepared for the transition from Ferndale to Riverton 45. Days after I joined Riverton, our Chemical Logistics Division was officially operational. Just in time for Cascade Chemicals' first shipments, the transition went flawlessly with every load delivered on schedule and in compliance with all regulatory requirements. Linda called personally to congratulate us. Not a single hiccup. "Gavin, that's why we followed you to Riverton." Global Pharma and Northeastern Chemicals followed suit the next week. Their transitions equally smooth. By the end of the second month, we had successfully captured over 60% of Ferndale's former chemical transportation business. The industry took notice. Trade publications ran articles about the seismic shift in specialized chemical logistics, with headlines like Riverton disrupts chemical transportation market and Ferndale. Logistics stumbles as key clients depart. One particularly detailed analysis in Transport Executive magazine included this telling paragraph. Industry insiders attribute Riverton's sudden dominance in chemical logistics to their strategic recruitment of Gavin Mororo, the architect of Ferndale's once leading chemical transportation division. Mororo's departure from Ferndale, reportedly replaced by CEO Richard Ferndale's Neela, despite his lack of relevant experience, preceded the client exodus by mere weeks. This sequence of events highlights the critical importance of specialized expertise in high-compliance transportation segments. Ferndale's stock price plummeted as investors reacted to the loss of major contracts. Financial analysts downgraded their outlook, citing concerns about leadership decisions prioritizing nepotism over operational expertise. Reports reached me through industry contacts that Ryder Beaumont was struggling catastrophically in his role as EVP of Operations. Without the experienced team members who had followed me to Riverton, he lacked both the knowledge and support system to maintain Ferndale's operational standards. Service failures mounted, regulatory violations increased, and the remaining clients began expressing dissatisfaction. 3 months after my departure, Ferndale announced a restructuring of their executive team. Ryder Beaumont was reassigned to a nebulous strategic initiatives role with no operational responsibilities. Margaret Chen called to tell me the real story. The board had finally forced Richard to remove his son-in-law from a position he was manifestly unqualified to hold. Too little, too late, Margaret said. The damage is done. We're hemorrhaging clients and the share price is in freefall. Are you considering your options? I asked, knowing she was too talented to remain on a sinking ship. Already interviewing elsewhere, she confirmed. This place isn't the same without you, Gavin, and now it's circling the drain. I felt a twinge of regret for the many good people still at Ferndale who would suffer as the company declined. But business was business. As Richard had so coldly reminded me, companies succeeded or failed based on the quality of their leadership decisions, and Richard had made a catastrophically bad one when he replaced me with his son-in-law. 6 months after joining Riverton, our chemical logistics division was exceeding all performance targets. We had expanded beyond the initial 3 major clients to capture several smaller accounts, increasing our market share even further. The terminal facility was operating at near capacity, and Wilson had already approved funding for expansion. My team had grown from the original 5 to over 50 specialists, including several more key personnel recruited from Ferndale as its situation deteriorated. Our safety record was impeccable, our on-time performance industry-leading, and our client satisfaction scores the highest in Riverton's history. Wilson called me into his office one afternoon, his expression unusually serious. "Have you seen this?" he asked, sliding a financial news report across his desk. The headline read, "Ferndale Logistics announces Chapter 11 bankruptcy restructuring." I skimmed the article, which detailed Ferndale's insurmountable financial challenges following the loss of key clients and subsequent operational difficulties. Richard Ferndale was stepping down as CEO to be replaced by a turnaround specialist appointed by the Creditors Committee. "I can't say I'm entirely surprised," I said, handing the report back to Wilson. "But it's still sobering to see a company I helped build for 18 years come to this." Wilson studied me thoughtfully. "Do you regret leaving, or what happened afterward?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that Richard made a decision that ultimately destroyed the company and hurt many good people who worked there. I regret that his nepotism trumped his business sense. But do I regret joining Riverton and building something better? Not." For a moment, Wilson nodded, satisfied with my answer. "Well, I have some news that might make you feel even better about that decision. The board has approved the accelerated timeline for spinning off the chemical logistics division as a separate business entity under the Riverton umbrella. Instead of 3 to 5 years, we're looking at 18 months with you as president and CEO." This was unexpected and enormously gratifying. That's quite an acceleration. Your performance warrants it, Wilson said simply. You've exceeded every metric. We established, captured market share faster than projected, and built a team that's setting new industry standards. The board recognizes exceptional achievement when they see it. Thank you, James. I'm honored by the confidence. You've earned it, he replied, and there's more. Your equity stake will increase to 25% upon the spin-off, with options for an additional 10% based on continued performance. It was an extraordinarily generous adjustment to our original agreement. One that could potentially make me wealthy beyond anything I had imagined while at Ferndale. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the remarkable turn my career had taken in just 6 months, from the crushing blow of being replaced after 18 years of loyal service, to now being on the verge of becoming CEO of my own company. It was a transformation I could never have anticipated. The next morning, I had a breakfast meeting with Linda Monroe to discuss expanding our services for Cascade Chemical. As I drove downtown, I took a route that passed by Ferndale Logistics Headquarters, or former headquarters, as a large 4-Lee sign now hung prominently on the building. I slowed slightly as I passed, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. There was vindication, certainly a sense that justice had been served for how I had been treated. But there was also a touch of sadness for what had been lost. For the company I had helped build from its earliest days. My phone chimed with a text message. It was from Ellie. Dad, you're in Forbes. How Gavin Mororo revolutionized chemical logistics and sank his former employer. So proud of you. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with revenge or vindication. My daughter was proud of me. That mattered more than anything Richard Ferndale or his board had ever done to me. At the traffic light, I took a moment to raise my travel mug of coffee and a small toast to myself. I hadn't sought revenge. I had simply pursued excellence on my own terms, building something valuable with people who recognized and respected my contributions. The light turned green, and I accelerated away from Ferndale's empty building, toward my meeting with Linda. Toward the future I was creating at Riverton. Toward the new company that would soon bear my imprint as CEO. Sometimes, I reflected, the best response to betrayal isn't revenge, it's success. And by any measure, what I had built in 6 short months was a success beyond what Richard Ferndale and his precious son-in-law could ever have imagined. As I pulled into the restaurant parking lot, my phone rang. It was James Wilson. Gavin, I just got off the phone with United Chemical. They're interested in moving their business to us. All of it. That would make us the largest chemical logistics provider in the Southeast. I smiled. Tell them, I'll meet with them personally this afternoon. Already scheduled for 2 p.m., Wilson replied. They specifically asked for you. That was the final confirmation, if I needed it, that I had made the right decision. My reputation, my expertise, my relationships. These were the true assets I possessed, not a title at a company that didn't value them. I'll be there, I promised, ending the call as I walked into the restaurant where Linda waited. The future stretched before me, bright with possibility. Not bad for someone who had been unceremoniously replaced after 18 years by the CEO's son-in-law. Not bad at all.